Constituents in Mike Freer MP's constituency have voiced their concerns, amongst many other people, following his announcement to step down due to basically a relentless barrage of death threats, abuse and intimidation. This is a guy who had advice that he had to wear a stab vest when seeing constituents. His office was burnt down, basically, or seriously damaged. And he announced recently his decision not to seek re-election this year as a result of these incidents, but also a suspected arson attack on his constituency office, as I said in December, really was the final straw, and he's been very candid about that. And this will take a toll on family and things, as I'm sure we'll hear shortly. But I think there's also a broader question as well, learning more about what Mike's been through and why he's taken his decision. It's also, this is an attack on democracy, and I think it's also a particular attack on how our MPs represent us, which I think democracy will pay a price for. But I'm very pleased to welcome Mike to the programme. Mike, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Nick. Good to see you.
Yeah, well, very good to have you here. We both entered Parliament at 2010. I'm sure nothing prepared you to think that this would be how you would be leaving Parliament many years later, 14 years later. Can you just briefly tell us, in your own words, what's led to this decision and what's happened to you?
Well, like many MPs, we learned to tolerate what I've termed low-level abuse. You know, we all get the rude emails, but increasingly social media attacks, increasingly aggressive. And it's things like, mock Molotov cocktails left on the doorstep of the office. People know where I live. I've been, in public service for over 30 odd years. So my address is common knowledge, but not the car I drive. And so, coming out and finding a note on the windscreen, which is only several weeks after John Mann, the then MP from Mansfield, had hit the wind nuts on his car tampered with. And things like, run-ins against Muslims against Crusades, who gave a very unsubtle threat that they were coming to attack me at one of my surgeries that I had in a local mosque. They came back the one after that to intimidate me. Then, of course, the Ali Harbi Ali man who went on to kill David Amess. It turns out he came to Finchley first and had told the police he came armed with a knife, and just purely by fluke, I wasn't in the office that day. All kind of getting worse, the level of debate coarsening, the level of intimidation getting worse. And then the arson attack on Christmas Eve, which could create a huge amount of damage, and my office is still unusable, is just the final straw. We sign up for it as members of Parliament to a degree, and many colleagues, as you will know, Nick, have to deal with this. Women colleagues especially get threatened with rape. We've got at least one of my colleagues who won't allow her children to use her surname so that they have a level of anonymity when they're at school. It's really not fair on our spouses, our families, that they should have to put up with it. As I said, to a degree, we sign up for it, but our families don't. And certainly, my husband Angelo has basically said that, enough is enough and it's time to step away.
I mean, Mike, people won't necessarily, apart from your constituents, know you as well as I've known how you've been as a constituency MP. You were always very much out there on the front meeting people. You even had this rather broken down mobile van, as I describe it.
You'll have it.
And you'd go and park it and just talk to people. What does this do, and how has it changed since 2010? To an MP's ability to relate and be available to his constituents? Did you row back consciously, or were you just basically knowing you were taking a risk every time you went outside?
You have to take sensible precautions. I took the decision when I was elected. I just didn't want to have surgeries in the office where you only see people with problems. Because you'll know, we always get criticised. We never see you apart from election times because most people don't get to see their MP. And so I took the decision. I got this rather old 30-odd-year-old, 40-year-old mobile home that I tootled around and parked on street corners, invited people to come and speak to me. Like many MPs have what's called supermarket surgeries, where we stand by the front door of the supermarket with a pull-up banner behind, saying who we are, come and talk to us, or even just taking out our advice surgeries into places like mosques and synagogues and churches and so on. After the Ali Harbi Ali attack, that's all changed. So now if I do the mobile home surgeries, I wear a stab vest. If I do the supermarket surgeries, I wear a stab vest. I do, like many MPs, have these advice fairs. I do them twice a year where 300-400 local residents come in and talk to me and various organisations. And now again, I wear a stab vest. In fact, at the last one, I also had private security at a discreet distance in the background just in case anything kicked off. So I think accessibility of our MPs is fundamental. And so I'm slightly wary, of course, for ever more security, because what I don't want to do is change what is very special about the way our MPs engage with the public. Security is important, but so is accessibility.
That's interesting. We've been actually asking that very question, what level of protection should your MP have? And some have gone to exactly the heart of it by saying this is actually undermining our democratic process, our relationship with an MP in the constituency. Is that why this is an attack on democracy? Or do you feel that this is being particularly targeted at you because of the staunch support you have shown for Israel, the staunch support of your constituents, where you have a high Jewish population? Do you feel that it has escalated beyond to such a level because of that one issue?
Not because I think it's true that it's escalated for all of us. I think there has genuinely been a coarsening of debate. People are getting away, whether it's through social media or whether it is through demonstration on the streets of London. People seem to be able to do things with impunity, and that has to change. So I think every MP has suffered a level of intimidation and abuse that we didn't used to have to suffer. I think it's also true to say that some of the more serious, if you like, threats to my life, or where I could have been seriously harmed, have been driven by my views on the Middle East and my standing up for both either Israel or against anti-Semitism. The first one was against Muslims, against Crusades, was very much because they regarded me as, rather oddly, a Jewish homosexual pig. Well, I'm not Jewish, and last time I looked, I wasn't a pig. So they got 1 out of 3. But they made it very clear that partly it was my views on Israel, but also having an Israeli supporting what they regard as a Jewish member of parliament who also happened to be inside a mosque was for them not acceptable. And that's why they made a rather pointed, use their expression, threat to me not being welcome in a mosque. And then Ali Harbi Ali had clearly been radicalised by IS. He wasn't part of a group, as far as I know. He was radicalised online. In fact, Nick, they are the hardest ones to spot. So clearly there's a pattern linking back to my support for my Jewish constituents and my support for Israel. But every MP has had an increase in threats and intimidation, and that has to go back to the root cause of why do people feel, if you like, they've got a green light to attack MPs. So more security isn't the answer. It's helpful, but it's not addressing the root cause.
But Mike, I'm absolutely certain this would have been a really difficult decision for you to have made, to stand down. Is there part of you, when you were coming to this decision, was there a stubborn part of you that said, actually, I'm giving in to these people, they're winning if I stand down?
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, if anything, it makes me want to be more vocal and more supportive of the causes I feel most passionately about. But at the end of the day, it's not fair on Angela, my husband, in terms of after the Ali Harbi attack, he doesn't like to see me going out to work in a stab vest. He doesn't like the fact that I walk home from the tube station. Now, in many ways, 99.9% of the time, it's perfectly safe. But he just doesn't want to take that risk that one night I'm not going to come home. In fact, and that level of anxiety has got worse. I mean, this week we had a knife attack in Golders Green, which turned out to be an anti-Semitic hate attack. And immediately Angelo said, see, I told you, it just takes one. And that's the issue. You never quite know what's around the corner. And that's why, yes, it's easy for me to say, I'm going to front it up, I'll be brave. But it's not really fair on our spouses and our families that they should have to worry about whether we're going to come home at night.
Mike, would you look one of your constituents in the eye, having been through what you've seen, the toxicity that's returned in Parliament, that, as you say, yes, it's been targeted at you at a very serious level, but is genuinely on the rise across Parliament. Would you recommend to someone that they become an MP?
No, frankly. In fact, I've got some friends who are on the candidates list, and I've seriously said to them, why do you want to do this? It's changed. You and I were elected in 2010, and democracy has always been robust, as it should be. One of our great strengths, I think, of our system, and I have friends in Israel, I have friends in France and Italy, they can't believe we go knocking on doors. But the fact our constituency system is so precious, the fact we have to go to the supermarket and have to defend our actions and defend our views, but in a polite, robust way, is really special. But these days, and it has just got worse since you and I were elected in 2010. So I do have to say, why would you give up a good career to put yourself through this? It is the most amazing job. It's a real privilege to be members of Parliament. But you do have to say, am I prepared for the level of abuse and intimidation, let alone death threats, that the job now entails? So people do need to think quite hard about whether this is the right move for them.
I mean, that's a huge statement you've made, that for understandable reasons about not recommending someone goes into it. The bottom line, though, is, aren't we all, if you like, facing then the biggest threat to democracy that we've seen in decades in this country? Because if good people won't step forward to do the job, who's going to do it? And is there anything our existing leaders can do to help rectify that situation?
Well, I still say to people, it is an amazing job and it can have some amazing rewards. The things you can do for people is truly special. But people do need to think very hard about whether they're prepared to put themselves at this level of risk. But what we do next is really about addressing the root cause, because the ability to argue with your elected representative is absolutely right. But the debate's polarised now. There's no that toing and froing of expression of ideas. It is either I'm right and you are completely wrong, or there's just no middle ground. And that is partly driven by social media. People see things on social media and simply accept it as true. There's very little fact-checking. So that is a fundamental problem. And equally, what we see on the streets of London at the moment is we see a level of behaviour that would not have been tolerated a few years ago. I mentioned to another journalist, I'm old enough to remember the IRA bombings in central London. If we had people wandering down the streets of central London dressed as IRA terrorists, do you think we'd have tolerated it then? We'd have arrested them on the spot. Yet now people can walk down the streets of London dressed as Hamas terrorists and get away with it. We have people being openly anti-Semitic. And the police will say, oh, don't worry, we investigate and we arrest them at a later date. Well, great, but that's not good enough for my constituents because they see them getting away with it. Most of the public don't see the arrests. They see somebody standing on the streets of London dressed as a terrorist or saying things that we know are wrong and seemingly getting away with it. That has to stop. Whilst people are able to abuse and intimidate and given free rein to do so without consequence, that is what is fueling this level of attacks on our systems of democracy.
Would you say multiculturalism has failed in this country?
No, I wouldn't go that far. As you know, Nick, I take great pride in the work I've done over many years, long before I became a Member of Parliament, to work on interfaith. And I do not want to go down the line that a few Islamic terrorists or a few people who are overstepping the mark represent a whole community. Certainly, I see in my patch, which is very diverse. We have pretty much every religion represented. And what I see is that most people simply want to get on with their lives. You know, they want their kids to go to good schools, they want good jobs, they want to be able to walk the streets in safety. And I don't want to taint a whole community by the actions of some individuals. What we do have to do is say, here is a line, cross it, and you will suffer the consequences. Equally, we do have work to do on what I call British values. I don't expect anybody to agree with me all the time. At any time, I don't expect them to like my views or like me, as if you like, as a Tory politician or as a gay man or a supporter of Israel, whatever my views are. I don't always expect people to like them. What I do expect people to do is accept people for who they are. And when people want to try and change the way we operate as a country, that's not acceptable. You know, we do have to make sure that people sign up to British values. If they want the good bits of Britain, they have to sign up to the bits they don't agree with as well. That's how democracy works.
But is that a realistic prospect now, since division and tensions are very much at the top of everyone's agenda that we are talking about? I mean, are you optimistic that we can do it? And if you are optimistic, some would say, why don't you stay and try and be part of that optimism?
Well, it's a fair challenge, but equally, it's not just me, is it? I have to think of my husband and my family. The bottom line is, I am optimistic. I do think that with the Conservative efforts, not just on working with the impact of social media, not just improving the policing of unacceptable behaviour, but I do think we need to do more work in our schools and using all of the avenues to educate people that this is a pluralistic society and you accept people even if you disagree with them. So I think we can have a more widespread, if you like, plan of action to try and ensure that the level of debate is much more tolerant than it currently is.